CharityVillage Connects. Today we're discussing the pressing need for the nonprofit sector to embrace technology to survive and thrive in the future. Joining us today is Matt Ambrose, a partner at BDO Canada. With over 23 years of professional experience providing management and technology consulting services, Matt has worked globally with public, private, and nonprofit organizations and regularly speaks and has authored works on emerging technology trends. Recently, BDO released a new digital playbook designed to help nonprofit organizations embrace digitization of their operations. Matt is here to tell us more. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Thanks, Mary. Happy to be here. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Well, let's start with whether you could introduce us to some of the work that BDO does with nonprofits, and especially your work around digitization.
Yeah, BDO is a full-service firm and provider, and we do work with tax, audit, and advisory. I'm a partner in our management consulting practice, and I lead digital strategy. Digital strategy is a hot topic for all nonprofits, frankly, and all organizations around the world. And so ultimately what we do is help them figure out how to identify, align, and prioritize their technology investments and to reach their business goals and objectives.
Well, I think the for-profit sector is, I would say, more ahead of the nonprofit sector, and for many variety of reasons. But maybe you could tell us why digitization is important specifically for nonprofits. In other words, for nonprofits who have yet to get started, why should they invest in this kind of work, particularly when they have such tight budgets?
Yeah, that's a great question. Digitization is front and center for everyone. When you think about some of a lot of nonprofits, frankly, they haven't fully embraced digital. And the challenge that they face is everyone around the world has embraced digital. And so a lot of them are laggards and they need to catch up. Why do they need to embrace digital? Because everyone that they engage with, whether it be the donors, the partners, the recipients, everyone is using digital. When was take a look at when you walk down the street or you walk in a store, or you're sitting in an office. Everyone is using mobility nowadays. Gone are the days of pen and paper or manual transactions, etc. So digital is involved with everything that we do nowadays. And so nonprofits really need to catch up, frankly. When I think about it, really depends on where they are in the maturity curve, but organizations that haven't embraced digital have to catch up. And not only is it on the outside, but it's also on the inside. If you think about some of the skills, number of folks have been involved in the nonprofit industry for years and likely decades. And the next generation, when you think about from a succession planning perspective or even a current skills perspective, the people that are coming in or that you're trying to attract, they are expecting digital. Nobody wants to work with Excel anymore.
Yeah, too true. That's certainly one of the biggest barriers is simply a demographic shift for sure. And also the fact that, the donors that nonprofits are trying to connect with are already gone through or are in the process of digitizing themselves. So it makes a lot of sense to be connected in the same way they are. But other than that, what are the biggest barriers preventing nonprofit organizations from making better progress in this area?
Yeah, there are lots of barriers. Budgets you mentioned budgets earlier, and that's a big factor, obviously. Where do you start? How much is it going to cost? Where are we going to get the funding? I would suggest that is probably the biggest barrier. Or at least the starting point. And there are a number of different ways to address that. And we can talk about that as we go through this, our conversation today. But the other barrier is the capability gap. What are the skills that are required to support nonprofits of today and tomorrow, frankly. And where are you going to find those skills? Are you going to develop them internally? Or are you going to have to look externally and acquire those? What do you even need, frankly, and how are you going to bridge that gap?
And so, if it's a kind of a carrot or a stick scenario here, when we look at the carrot side, what do you see as the biggest benefits for organizations who make a commitment to digital transformation? So, what kind of results can they have that would influence an organization to think about, well, I better get on this train because it's going fast and I don't want to be left behind?
Yeah, the ultimately, if you think about it, you will have better access to data. You'll be able to trust your data. So if you think about from a data integrity perspective, you'll have better community and stakeholder engagement and transparency, auditability, those types of things. Those are all big factors. And through better engagement, you will be able to provide a better service. The community is going to benefit. Your stakeholders are going to benefit, which means that could have a direct benefit into more funding, frankly, because the more visibility and transparency that donors get, maybe the more they're going to be willing to provide. And not only that, the other thing is too, it's the measurability of your success. Being able to having access to the data you'll then be able to report back on certain metrics and KPIs so that people will be able to see, are we actually having the intended impact that we set out for?
Yeah, I've certainly heard from a lot of people that the whole data question is really critical, and how you're able to sort of transform that data into actionable kinds of changes that can help streamline your operations, or even better deliver on a nonprofit organization's mission. Can you talk a little bit about how your new digital playbook, how it can help nonprofit leaders assess their digital performance? Like, please tell us what it's about and what it does.
Yeah, that's great. Our digital playbook is really designed to show you our approach and our process, frankly. It walks you through a defined approach in where you start, the key steps that you need to follow, and then ultimately what the end result is. And if you think about where do you start? You start off with reimagining what it is, how you're going to operate. Don't and going beyond the typical constraints or limitations of what we used to do in the past. And what I mean by that is we tend to look at things from a people, process, and technology perspective. Let's break down those barriers. Let's reimagine how we want to act, or what we want to do, how we want to engage. Think about the art of the possible. So let's redefine what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Then you take a look at, all right, so what do we have today? What's the current state? And where are we going to go in the future state? What are the gaps? How are we going to bridge those gaps? And then sequentially, what projects do we need to do? What initiatives do we need to take on so that we can bridge those gaps? Then you look at the funding. What's the required funding to do this, and where's it going to come from? And then there's a few more steps in there as well, but it's ultimately getting you to that roadmap so that you understand what is it that we're going to do, when we're going to do it, why we're going to do it, and what's it going to cost. And so that's an important process to go through. And I think a lot of folks in the nonprofit industry, frankly, are trying to effectively playing whack-a-mole, if you will, trying to figure out. They're just responding. They're so busy just trying to put out fires. They're dealing with internal and external pressures, reporting all kinds of things. And so they need a plan. They need a roadmap. And so our digital playbook effectively helps guide them through here's a sequence of events or a process that you can follow to make sure that you're actually going to realize what it is you're set out to. And everyone is aligned. That's the other thing. Let's make sure that the entire organization is aligned, including our stakeholders.
And does that apply to both larger nonprofits, the ones that are significantly sized and may even be part of a network across the globe, or will it work as well with a small nonprofit? There's many small nonprofits across Canada.
Sure, and that's a great question. It's kind of, I know one of my famous sayings is, how long is a piece of string? Not that I invented that, by the way, but it's the playbook does apply to everyone, but the level of detail and what you want to accomplish. So ultimately, what is our plan? That plan's going to be specific to each nonprofit organization. What do you want to accomplish? How are you going to accomplish it? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? All of those things are relevant to everyone. It doesn't matter how small or large your organization is. And it doesn't matter to the level of complexity. What the individual sort of bits and bytes or initiatives are, that level of detail is going to vary. You can't just come up with a plan and say, okay, all nonprofits are going to follow this plan. It doesn't work that way. I'm an analogy guy. So just like no two snowflakes are alike, no two nonprofits are alike. And so, it's really working through, but the process can be the same. Well, absolutely it's the same, right?
So the playbook talks about digital transformation surpassing just the technology infrastructure, but it's also being part of a mindset, that there's a transformation that has to happen in the mindset of the leaders of these organizations. It's not just a technology issue. And within a nonprofit organization, which is distinctive, what do you mean by that? And how is it important for nonprofit leaders to adopt a different kind of mindset when they're talking about digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of times people think about digital transformation as just an IT upgrade, right? And if you think about when you look at our digital playbook, we reference the 3Ds: digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. And the playbook talks about digitization is just where you take a manual process and you digitize it. A very simple process where you're using technology, but it's not really changing anything. Like maybe you're just getting rid of paper for that matter. Digitalization, and going back to your original question, that a lot of folks just think about upgrading their infrastructure. That's not digital transformation. Putting in new systems or new technology for the sake of technology, that's not a digital transformation. What digitalization is really about rethinking a process. Instead of a manual process, let's take the payables process, for example. Every month you get invoices in, and someone goes in and they perhaps check 5 different things. What's the PO number, what's the date, what's the vendor, what's the amount, that sort of thing. Those are all standardized, very routine tasks, if you will. And it's, for a lot of organization, the digitization of that is manually inputting it into a computer, a spreadsheet, an ERP system, or a financial system, etc. And it's very routine and monotonous and very time consuming. Digitalization is where you actually look at that process and say, is that standardized? Can we automate that? Can we leverage technology to remove that manual process? And I don't want to give the impression it's not about, you don't have to get 100% either. Sometimes you look at the 80-20 rule. Can we automate 80% of that? And in this particular example that I'm using for the payables process, there's technology called RPA, robotic process automation. And it can do just that. It can go in and it can take your payable, your invoices. It can do all the checks and balances, that 5-step process. You may set up some rules that say anything within based on certain thresholds, for example. Any invoices that are just for arbitrary sake, say under $500, if these 5 things check out, then just pay it and generate a report for me, and I'll look at it later. You may have another threshold that says if that goes beyond that number, or if they don't check out, then I want you to kick them out to an exception report, and then I'll manually inspect them, or someone will. So there's a great example of digitalization where you're using technology to automate some of those routine and mundane processes. You're eliminating the manual processes. You're reducing errors. With technology, we've got greater auditability. We're also making sure there's not a duplication of you're not paying twice, for example. So a bunch of other benefits come to mind as well. And you're freeing up those resources to be able to focus on higher value added tasks. I'm going to sort of long-winded way there, but coming back to your original question was, why would you do these types of things? Well, the benefits are there. The challenge that an organization or NPOs have is that I think there's a real fear factor. Again, I'll go back to sort of, you mentioned earlier, Mary, about the, small versus large NPOs. I'm going to suggest some of the smaller ones. Folks have been doing the same thing for years, if not decades. Maybe their digital maturity is not as high as others, no disrespect to anyone. So there is some fear factor, right, with some folks. And so the challenge for a lot of NPOs is the capabilities, the skills, the fear of the unknown, if you will. So creates a lot of opportunity. And I think getting back to the how do you address that? We need to make sure that we have the right skills. We need to make sure that our people are aware, ramped up, trained, and also not afraid to think outside of the box. I think that's another key component. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and a lot of times folks, they don't know what they don't know, and so I think that's it. That's another key component is making sure that they, again, I go back to you talked about the digital playbook, and working through a structured process like that helps you understand what is the art of the possible. How does it relate to you? How can it benefit your organization? And what are the benefits, some of the risks, the considerations, and how do we make it happen?
So you mentioned there was the digitization, which was that sort of step that you talked where you might manually put it into a database, for example. There is the digitalization where you're looking at ways where you can integrate, say, automation or make things more effective, or getting rid of some of those manual kind of things that slow you down. And then you also talked about digital transformation. So what can you describe what you mean by digital transformation?
Yeah, and that's the third D. So ultimately, digital transformation helps you transform your organization. Think about how do we offer potentially new services to the community? How do we provide, and that could be the services that you're providing or how you're engaging with the community and your donors and your partners, etc. Digital transformation is thinking about, okay, this is how we used to do it. Is there a better way? Can we provide a better service? Can we enhance an existing service? Can we potentially combine services with other nonprofits? So it's really about expanding the mind share, if you will. And because, and again, I'll go back to every organization's different. I don't want to give the impression that everyone needs to think that way, but it is about thinking differently and leveraging technology. Um, I was talking with some folks the other day, and kind of date myself, but I was referencing the Jetsons, and some of the audience didn't know who I was talking about. Others were laughing, but nonetheless.
I do. I know who you're talking about.
But if you think about the Jetsons, when we were kids and watching that seems so futuristic. It seems so like unrealistic that will never happen. Yet everything that's in the Jetsons, aside from us buzzing around in cars in space, it exists today. You've got robots to do work for us. You've got 3D printing that can actually do things like organics. I'm not suggesting that we're eating 3D printed steaks yet, but they could. The technology exists today. We've got flying cars. We've got all the technology that was available, and that was even sort of predating even things like microwaves and that sort of thing, right? But if you think about the world of technology and how quickly it has evolved, and back then, we used to look at technology advancements in sort of decades, like years, decades, multiple decades. We're now measuring some of these technological advances in down to minutes, right? If you think about some things that go, and especially for nonprofits, if you think about some of their objectives, their missions, right? If the information goes viral instantly, you can get to 100 million people in a matter of minutes nowadays through social media. So how do you stay on top of that? How do you pivot what you're looking to accomplish and build that in? Again, going back to your original question, digital transformation. It's all about digital transformation. It's how the world operates today. I do lots of public speaking, and I tell organizations all the time, with all due respect, if you're not embracing technology, I don't think you'll be around in 5 years. You don't have a choice. You have to do it. And I'll go back to one of your earlier comments, Mary, was, it is absolutely required. And not only is the public demanding it, your donors are demanding it. And when you get into the talent, the war on talent, as we call it, they're demanding it. People don't want to come into an organization and say, here's a mountain of paper that we need to sort through. Quite frankly, a lot of the younger generation, they want to be able to do it on their cell phone. Pick up their phone, and whether it's an app or maybe it's a cell phone, a tablet, etc. They don't want to be tied to what we call legacy processes.
Absolutely. And the Jetson brings things back for me, but too true. It is quite an amazing way of looking back at history and seeing how the pace of change is so much faster today, and the urgency with which the nonprofit sector has to transform itself is really, and embrace technology and digitization is really critical. But digitization also requires a lot of really great leadership around change management, particularly some of these organizations who've really been relying on past practice and the old ways they used to do things. How do you get stakeholders on board with these major changes that have to be made? What advice do you have for nonprofit leaders in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. It all ties back to the culture of the organization. And what's your mission? What are you trying to accomplish as an NPO? And from a leadership perspective, whether it's the board or the executive director, etc., they need to buy into it as well, right? Like it needs to come from the top, and it needs to get, again, with all due respect, it needs to get pushed down. You cannot expect your people to embrace if you're not going to embrace yourself. And it's very important to make sure that the boards and the executive director, that they're all aligned. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Why are we trying to do this? When are we going to do it? And you have our full support. Digital transformation is a journey. It's not a tick the box exercise. Uh, Quite frankly, you can't do it overnight. It will take time, and it is also a work in progress. I don't want to give the impression like digital transformation, quite frankly, there isn't an end date to it. And so I think folks need to recognize that. It's not, digital transformation is not a matter of just implementing a piece of software and saying, okay, we went live on Monday, we're good. It doesn't work that way. The world will continue to evolve. Technology will continue to evolve. The communities and the demographics and the demands will continue to evolve, and we need to keep up with that. So culture is key. And when you look at our digital playbook, we talk a little bit about culture and the fact of making sure that people are equipped with the tools and technologies and understanding around digital processes and tools, etc. You want to make sure that people are supported, they're aware, they're trained, and they understand. You can't just force it out either. And say, again, I go back to an implementation example. You can't push it out on Monday and just say, okay, thou shalt use it now. They need to be trained and comfortable. And so you need a change management program. Going back to your question, you need a change management program in place to make sure that they're equipped properly and have the comfort level too.
Now, I'd like to end with a really sort of positive side and ask you whether you have a success story that you can share about an organization who's made progress in terms of digitization and that digital transformation that you could share with our audience for some inspiration and maybe some tips.
Yeah, that's a great one. I must admit, one of the things that drives me is seeing the smile on people's faces when we get to help them through this digital transformation journey. And I just I'll give you an example. I got a note the other day that just said, thanks to you and the team for helping us through this process. I'm a bit of a pat on the back for the team as well. They said we couldn't have done it without you, and we wish we engaged you sooner, because they had been trying to go through this process on their own with no success, and the challenge was, and like I said, you need to have a plan, right? We walked them through their process, and the one that I'm thinking about is wasn't a huge one, right? We've got small examples, we've got large examples, we've got medium examples, frankly. We walked them through the process and helped them figure out, where is it that you are trying to go? And how do we get you there? And when we came up with a roadmap, it wasn't a 3 or 5 year journey where, oh, by the way, it's going to take this long to get you there. We identified some quick wins that they could start implementing immediately so that we could build momentum. Through the quick wins, through that process, we freed up some resources so that they could focus on higher value added tasks. We helped change the culture, because frankly, there were some naysayers in the organization that were resistant to change. We helped them understand, here's why, here's the impact on themselves and the benefits, frankly. And it was a very positive experience where they just didn't know what they didn't know. And the end result was that, a thrilled team. We're still in the process of implementing and or executing on the roadmap. It was for our internal team, from their perspective, everyone felt good. And anyway, so that's a happy note. I will add to that, don't ever think you're alone, because you're not. And whether you choose to reach out to us or someone else, I strongly encourage you, get help, reach out. Who are your trusted advisors? reach out to them, work with them, ask for some guidance, ask for some help, and don't ever feel that you need to do this journey alone.
Well, Matt, thank you for your insights and advice. I know that the digital playbook will be so helpful for so many nonprofits across Canada seeking to build resilience by embracing digitization and pursuing this journey for digital transformation. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here today, and have a great day.